All right, so the goal today is we're going to finish the notes from yesterday. There's just a little bit that we didn't cover. And then my other goal is to have you finish these 3 things from this week, all right, in class. So it's the practice from Tuesday, the practice that you picked up yesterday, and then this puzzle piece. So hoping that we can get those all taken care of, because they're all about really the same thing. And then also I need to pass out some missing assignment reports still. So I'm going to adjust the deadline for the orange folders up until Monday. So that gives you the weekend and Monday to get that finished. So make sure that we are doing that. I gave you all a missing assignment report. Some people I still need to give it to. It was accurate as of Monday. So make sure we're getting those highlighted assignments turned in. All right, any questions? All righty then. So this note sheet we went over yesterday. If you were absent, here's a quick rundown. All right, I introduced this formula. And all that we're doing is identifying A, B, and C in our quadratic equation, and then plugging them in here. All right, you can use a calculator to like simplify certain parts, which we'll cover again today. So other than that, you know, just really making sure that we know how to simplify things. So yesterday we went over, you know, how to rearrange them if they're not in standard form. I know there was one problem on the practice that might have been a little tricky. So if you want to look at number 5 on your practice, notice it's a little shorter than we're used to seeing, but it is set to 0, and it is in standard form. So for that one, what letter is missing, A, B, or C? The B value, right? Because that's the number that would normally be in front of the X. And there's no X there. It's just an X squared and like a single number. So since the B value isn't there at all, what is the B value? 0. Good. So for number 5, if you want to make a little side note there, we won't do that one in class. I think you guys can take care of that one yourselves. But if you just want to make a little side note, that B is 0 for number 5. Then that should clear up any confusion for that one. All right. Now the types of problems that we're going to focus on today from the note sheet is going to be those irrational solutions. So by irrational, basically like that radical symbol, the square root symbol, when it's a number that's not a perfect square. So like the square root of 22, is that a perfect square? No, it's not. But all that I'll be looking for is that you simplify the radical and you just write your answer in the correct way. So how about we do a quick warm up of the normal type of solutions. So let's look at number 7. It shows me now. Have you thrown it away? All right. So we'll look at number 7 real quick. First things, going from the step-by-steps, is number 7 in the correct format? All right, does it look like what I wrote over here? This would be the correct format. Right, it does not, right? So what you'll have to do is rearrange it, and now there's 2 things that we actually have to move. So we'll do it one at a time. Let's start with moving the X. How can I move it if it's like positive over here? Subtract it. Because that's how we get them to cancel out, right? X minus X would give me 0, which is what I want. And then whatever I do on one side, I have to do to the other. All right, what else do I have to move?
So negative 10.
And since it's negative, how can I make that cancel out over here? You would add 10. So whether you add or subtract completely depends on how you make it cancel out. All right? So on the right side of our equal sign, these canceled out. So we just have 0, which is good. That's what we're supposed to have. But on the left side, we need to combine like terms. Is there anything to combine that x squared with?
No.
So I'm just going to rewrite it. Any x terms that I can combine?
Yeah.
So 7x minus x is, and it's positive, so put plus 6x. And then we have that plus 10 that's left. All right, now we have our correct form. So step 1 is done. Questions about that? All right, so step 2 is to plug it into the formula. All right, and I'll rewrite the formula here. I've gotten good at memorizing it over the years. All right, I won't expect you guys to memorize it, but just know you're going to see it over and over again. All right, so we're plugging these A, B, and C values into this formula. So what's my A value for number 7? My B value?
6.
And my C value? Good, they're all positive this time. Now just plug them in, practice doing it yourself. I'll do it on the board while you do that. Anytime you plug something in, put it in parentheses. All right, it'll save you a lot of trouble later. You can avoid making some mistakes that way. All right, so once you finish plugging those numbers in on your own paper, compare it to mine, make sure it looks the same. We get -6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 10, all divided by 2 times 1. All right, any questions there? All right, so last step is just to simplify, and we can break this into smaller parts to make it better. So starting over here, it's like 6 parentheses, like a negative outside the parentheses. We can probably get rid of those parentheses, right? It just becomes a -6 there. All right, plus or minus. Now this portion over here, that square root part, let's make our lives a little easier and go ahead and put that into Desmos. Does it? I think it should say something else. Let me see. Oh, okay. I know why. All right, so try it out in Desmos so that you're familiar with how it looks. Let's see. And then after you get your answer, just kind of double check what you put into Desmos. Because if you're off by a sign or off by a parenthesis, it might not work. All right, but look at what we have. Let me go to the right spot. If you plugged it in correctly into the calculator, it should look like this. All right, notice it equals undefined. Now, if that's the case and you double checked it, you put everything in correctly that it's supposed to be, I would probably just copy and paste whatever's under the square root to see what it actually equaled before we took the square root of it. And it equaled a -4. Now, is it possible to take the square root of a negative number? It is not possible. That's why it says undefined. So if you run into that situation and you're 100% sure that you entered it correctly, then what ends up happening, so let me go back to the notes. What ends up happening is since you cannot take the square root of a negative number, so this is what we have so far. Since you cannot take the square root of a negative number, then there's going to be no solution. All right, and I would prefer that if there's no solution, you write it like this, no solution. I don't want you to get confused with x equals 0, or, I mean, this also means no solution. The 0 with the slash through it. But if you write it like this, I'll know what you're talking about. I think it's less confusing that way. So if you come across that situation where you would have to take the square root of a negative number, it's automatically no solution. All right, questions about that? So then on your practice, and I know like we were kind of doing the odds, if you want to do this one instead, that's fine. So on your practice for the U try, I'll have you do number 8 real quick. So on the practice from yesterday.
Would this count as like one of your odds?
Yes, if you were doing odds and you want to do number 8 instead of number 7, that is all right, but still everyone try this one so that I know you can do these types of problems. Yes. All right, so try that out. If you get stuck, let me know. So number 8, this one's a little easier, right? Because we don't have to do any rearranging, do we? It's in the correct form already. And set equals to 0. So we'll just start identifying our A, B, and C. So for number 8, what's our A value? I heard 1. -1, good. Show it to me and then. And then what is our B value? Colton, were you here yesterday? Okay, we're working on our stuff from yesterday. All right, so what's our B value for number 8? 7, and then our C value is good. So now we're gonna plug that into our formula, and I'll write it over here for your reference. All right, so then plugging it into our formula, -b, so -7, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. All right, so b squared minus 4ac, when we plug it in, is 7 squared minus 4 times -1 times -18, all over 2 times a, and we said a is -1. All right, I would not skip that step, just so that I don't make any mistakes. All right, but we can start simplifying. Like over here, we can remove those parentheses, becomes just a -7, plus or minus. And then when we put this part into decimals, what did we get? We got undefined. All right, if it says that, try maybe just putting what's under the square root into Desmos to see what that number actually is. What number was it? Negative 23, which is impossible, right? We cannot take the square root of a negative number, can we? So because of this part, we have how many solutions? No solution. Raylan, I'll add you to the line. All right, but that's what those types of problems look like. Any questions on that? All right, just one more type that I want to go over with you, and that's going to be those irrational solutions one. So the one that we will look at will be number 11 on your note sheet. All right, so going back to the note sheet. Sorry, Colton, I'll come back to this later. But number 11 on your note sheet, we've done a little bit with irrational solutions, so I'm just kind of refreshing your memory here. First thing with number 11, is this in the correct form? No. It is not in the correct form. All right, because it is not set equal to 0. So how can I make the right side equal 0? All right, if I subtract 20 on each side, that's how I make the right side cancel out, right? Because 20 minus 20 is 0. And whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other side. Can I combine that minus 20 with any of these terms? Which one can I combine with? So what is 9 minus 20? Negative 11, and then bring everything else down. All right, the other stuff didn't have any like. All right, so good. We rewrote it to the correct form. Step 2 is identify your A, B, and C. So what is my A value for number 11? My B value? Good, and then C value. Good. Plug that into your formula is the third step. So I'll write it over here for your reference. All right, and then practice plugging it in yourself to make sure like you know if you're getting a hang of it. But negative b, so -1 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 1 squared, minus 4ac. So -4 times 1 times -11. Thank you. And then all over to A. So then 2 times 1. You'll be after Brandon. All right, questions about how we plug this in? Now we just simplify, which I realize I'm running out of room, sorry. But this is all for number 11 here. Simplify this, I get -1 without the parentheses. So this becomes a regular -1. Plus or minus the square root, let's put that into decimals. All right, so I'll give everyone a chance to try that into decimals, see what it looks like. It might look weird at first, but I'll tell you how to navigate through that. All right, so when you plug that into Desmos, exactly how it looks, you might be a little confused at first because we get this long decimal. All right, we don't want decimals. Those aren't exact. So here's what we'll do instead. If you double check it, make sure that it is in the correct form, right? It's exactly how it looks on your paper. I'm just gonna copy and paste what's under the square root to see what it was before we took the square root. All right, so when I did that, what I essentially have right there is the square root of 45. Now, is the square root of 45 a perfect square? It is not a perfect square. So that's why I gave you that weird decimal. So that's what an irrational solution. So I'm going to go back to my notes, and I'm going to replace this portion with the square root of 45. All right, and then simplify the bottom. 2 times 1 is 2. So far, this is what we have. Now, one more thing that we need to do before we just circle this and put this as our final answer is we want this radical, the square root of 45, to be simplified. So we're going to simplify that radical, and we're going to use our factor tree. So that's like that little GIL method that we talked about. So what are 2 numbers that multiply to 45? 5 and 9. Are they both prime? So 9 breaks into 3 and 3. We only want to look at our prime numbers. So I'm going to cross out these ones, right? Because these were broken down more. That makes them not prime. And in order for them to escape this little radical, this little jail, if you want to call it that, is they need to have a partner. So which number has a partner? All right, I have a pair of 3s. Since they have a partner, they can escape the jail. We just write it once for every year. So the 3s escape. What number did not escape? The 5, so that will go inside the jail because it didn't have a partner. It stays there. So that is what's going to replace this part right here. So my final answer, I would write like this. -1 plus or minus 3 radical 5 all over 2. And that is sufficient enough. All right, we can't simplify more than that. It's not a perfect square, so we're not going to get one nice number. This is the exact solution. All right, questions about that? All right, let's see which one I'll have you try from your practice. And we'll do number 11 on your practice if you haven't already. All right, so we did 11 on our notes. The you try will be number 11 on your practice from yesterday. All right, we'll go over that one, but that's really all of the teaching that I have for you today. So if you finish that one, move on to the other things on the to-do list. So I was thinking of stuff here, right? If I have -1, First thing we are checking for, is it in the right form? Is it in standard form set equal to 0? All right, what's it equal to right now? 6x. Is that 0? So we need to make it 0. How can I make 6x equal 0? Good. So by doing that, by subtracting 6x, I get 0 on the right side, which is what we want. And then to make this still be equal, I also have to do it on the left side. All right, so that cancels out on the right side. On the left side, are there any like terms to combine? We have an x squared, an x, and a constant. So no like terms. We're just going to rewrite it. All right, keep the sign that's directly in front of each term. All right, now identify your A, B, and C. So my A value is good. My B value is positive or negative? Good. And then C value is good. Now that step 2 is just identifying those. Step 3 is to plug it into that formula, the quadratic formula. All right, so hopefully you were able to do that correctly. Just pay attention to those small details. That's why I say to plug it in with like parentheses so that you don't make any mistakes. But in the numerator, we get negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 1. All divided by 2 times 4. All right, so we just plug this in to here. Questions about how we did that? Now simplify where you can. So what happens to this double negative over here? All right, so like negative, kind of like having -1 times -6. What would that be? A positive 6. Plus or minus, put that into Desmos. What did you get when you entered that in? All right, you probably got undefined. So the next thing that you would do is plug in that into what's underneath it by itself. So basically just take out the square root. All right, so, or you didn't get undefined, you got a decimal. All right, but still something that you might have to stop and just double check that you entered it correctly before you move on. So since it equals a decimal, I want to know what it was before I took the square root of it. So I'm just gonna take away that square root symbol, and it's 52. All right, the square root of 52 is what gave us that long decimal. So I'm gonna replace that portion in our formula with the square root of 52. All right, and then simplify your denominator. 2 times 4 is 8. Now, can I just leave my answer like that? I cannot, because the radical isn't simplified. So I can leave it in this setup. I just need to simplify that radical. So what are 2 numbers that multiply to 52? Probably 2 and another number. Good. 2 is prime, 26 is not. So two numbers that multiply to 26. Good. Now are 2 and 13 both prime? It is. So now we're just going to start looking for those pairs. So I'm just going to kind of cross out the numbers that aren't prime. So the numbers that were broken down more, we're not worried about those. Just looking at our prime numbers, which ones have pairs? The 2s. So that pair of 2s gets to escape. It gets to be on the outside. What number stays on the inside? 13. All right, because they don't have a partner, but they're also prime, so they don't get to escape the little bit. All right, so I'm just going to replace this portion, that radical 52, with our new simplified radical, 2 radical 13, all over 8. Technically, this could be simplified more, but I don't want to confuse you. I don't want to make it too difficult. If you can get to this step, just simplify the radical and just put it in this format, then that is good for this level of algebra. All right, so that's all I have for you. Any questions? All right, we have about 16 solid minutes of independent work time. I'm here if you need help. You can meet me at the back table. You can call me over and I'll look at it. But I really want you guys to try and get those 3 things done from the to-do list.